In a quiet, forgotten town where dust settled on broken roads and memories lived longer than people, stood a small, worn-out house at the very end of a narrow street. Its walls were cracked, its paint had faded, and its door creaked every time it opened. But inside that broken house lived a heart that had never once learned how to stop loving. That heart belonged to a widow named Amina. Amina had not always lived in silence and loneliness. Once, laughter filled this house. Once, a man's footsteps echoed in its rooms. Once love was shared instead of endured. But fate is cruel to those who love purely. Her husband, Rashid, died suddenly when their only son Hamza was just 7 years old. A sudden illness. 3 days in the hospital. And then, one breath, and he was gone. From that day on, Amina stopped living for herself. She lived only for Hamza. Amina was not educated. She had no degree, no powerful support, no maliguardia. All she had were trembling hands, a weak body, and a son who looked at her with frightened eyes on the night his father died that night. Hamza held her hand and asked, Ami, abawa paskapayenge. Amina smiled through broken tears gelled high. Beta, ala kepas geheim. She had no idea how many lies she would tell just to keep her son alive with hope. She stitched clothes at night until her fingers bled. She cleaned dishes in rich homes where people refused to drink water from her glass. She washed floors where children were taught to look down at her like she was nothing. And every evening she returned home with tired legs and burning hands, but with food for her son. Many nights she fed Hamza and slept hungry herself. Many winters she covered her son with the only blanket and shivered in the cold. Many times she cried in silence so he would never hear the sound of her breaking heart. She had only one prayer, Ya Allah, just make my son successful. Take my life if you must, but never take his future. Years passed. Hamza grew into a young man, tall, handsome, sharp. The same boy who once feared darkness now walked confidently into the world with dreams in his eyes. He studied hard. He respected his mother. He was known in the neighborhood as the widow's golden son. When Hamza got a job in the city as a junior officer in a private firm, the entire street celebrated. People came to Amina's house with sweets. Your son changed your destiny, they said. Amina smiled with shaking hands. No, she whispered. Allah changed my son's destiny. That night, Hamza placed his first salary in Amina's hands. She refused. This is your future, she said softly. He forced it back into her hands. This is your reward, he replied. She cried that night not from pain, but from pride. She believed her suffering had meaning now. She was wrong. 2 years later, Hamza decided to marry. The girl's name was Sarah. She was modern, educated, from a family that valued wealth more than emotions. She wore confidence like jewelry and spoke with perfect control. From the very first meeting, Amina sensed something cold behind Sarah's smile. She could not explain it, but a mother's heart recognizes storms before clouds appear. Still, Amina welcomed her warmly. She prepared the food herself. She gifted her the only gold bangles she owned. She prayed for her like a daughter. On the wedding day, while music filled the hall and lights shone brightly, Amina sat quietly in a corner, watching her son become someone else's responsibility. She whispered, "Oh Allah, take care of my son better than I ever could." After marriage, Sarah moved into Amina's house, the same house where Hamza had taken his first step. Amina had cried, holding him after every fever. Rashid had once dreamed of his son's success. Amina gave Sarah her own room. She shifted herself into the small storage room beside the kitchen. When Hamza asked why, she smiled. New bride needs space. Sarah never asked where Amina slept. Days passed. Sarah began to notice everything: the old curtains, the simple crockery, the smell of traditional food, the slow pace of an aging mother. Everything irritated her, but she didn't complain loudly. Not yet. One evening, when Hamza came home late from work, Sarah spoke in a soft, controlled tone. "Hamza, don't you think your mother interferes a little too much in your life?" Hamza looked up surprised. "What do you mean?" "She asks where you go, when you come, what you eat, what you spend. She's my mother. I know, but now you're also my husband." That sentence quietly carved a line between two hearts that night. Hamza felt something strange for the first time: confusion between duty and desire. Mina didn't need words to understand change. She felt it in the way Hamza avoided sitting with her, the way he answered briefly, the way he no longer told her about his work. She pretended not to notice. Marriage changes boys, she told herself. She started waking earlier, cooking quietly, staying invisible. Because love that fears loss learns to disappear. Sarah's words became sharper. "She's too old-fashioned. She makes this house depressing. She is always watching." Slowly, Hamza stopped defending his mother. He started listening. He started believing. One night, Sarah cried, "I feel suffocated in this house. Hamza, I feel like a guest." That night, Hamza slept restless. And every restless night weakens the strongest morals. Early one morning, Hamza walked into Amina's room. "You should interfere less." Amina's hands shook. "Interfere," she repeated. Double quotes. "Yes. Sarah doesn't feel comfortable." Amina said nothing. She folded her prayer mat slowly, and something inside her folded with it. From that day, She stopped entering their room. She stopped asking about their fights. She stopped laughing. She became a shadow inside the home she built with her blood and sweat every night. She sat alone, holding her husband's old photograph. "You were right. Boys grow up and forget," she whispered. One night, after a heated argument, Sarah screamed, "Either she stays in this house, or I do." The house went silent. Hamza looked at the floor and he made a choice. Not as a son, but as a man afraid of losing his wife, and that choice would destroy a mother. Forever the room was silent after Sarah's final scream. "Either she stays, or I do." Those words did not echo in the walls, they echoed inside Hamza's soul. Amina stood in the corner of the hallway, holding the edge of the door quietly. She had heard everything, every word, every threat, every insult disguised as pain. Her heart did not break loudly, it collapsed silently. Hamza stood between two worlds, the woman who gave him life, and the woman who shared his bed. His eyes were downcast. His hands trembled. His chest felt heavy. Sarah waited. Her arms were crossed, her eyes cold, her victory already planned in her heart. Hamza finally whispered, "Sarah, she's my mother." Sarah replied sharply, "And I am your wife. You choose, right now." That was the moment, the exact moment when a son failed his test of loyalty. Slowly, with a broken voice, Hamza turned toward the hallway and spoke. "Ami." Amina stepped forward. "Yes, beta." "Ami, for some time, it would be better if you stay with your sister." The world stopped. Amina did not understand the sentence at first. "Stay, with my sister," she repeated softly. "Yes, just for a few days, until things calm down." She looked at her son's face, not the face she fed with her hunger, not the face she protected with her prayers. She saw a stranger. She nodded. "As you wish," and that nod carried a lifetime of pain. That night, Amina returned to the tiny storeroom that had been her home since Sarah arrived. She sat on the floor and stared at the walls. This was where she prayed. This was where she cried. This was where she whispered her loneliness to Allah. And now, it was time to leave. She did not pack loudly. She did not cry loudly. She did not question loudly. She folded her old clothes neatly. She placed her husband's photograph gently inside a worn cloth. She tied her prayer mat with shaking hands. Each fold felt like she was folding a piece of her soul. Outside the room, Hamza stood at a distance. He did not come in. He did not help. He did not stop her, because regret is loud only after damage is done. When Amina stepped out with her small bag, Sarah stood in the doorway watching, not with guilt, with relief. Amina looked at her one last time. "Take care of my son," she said softly. Sarah said nothing before leaving. Amina stood at the entrance of the house. She touched the doorframe. This was where Hamza had held her finger to walk. This was where Rashid had promised her a safe future. This was where Eid mornings once felt warm. She whispered, "Allah, you are witness. I never wanted to leave." Hamza stood behind her. "I'll come see you," he said without confidence. She smiled. "You don't have to." And with that, she stepped out. Amina went to her sister, Nusrat's house. But destiny is cruel even to blood relations. Nusrat's husband disliked guests. Her daughter disliked responsibility. And Amina was not a guest, she was a burden. For the first few days, Nusrat tried, but irritation grows faster than compassion. "Baji, how long will you stay?" Nusrat finally asked. Amina lowered her eyes. "Until my son calls me back." That call never came. Weeks passed. Hamza never followed, never visited, never even called. And with every silent day, Amina felt herself becoming lighter, like a soul preparing to leave the world. She stopped eating properly. She stopped sleeping properly. She stopped talking much. She sat by the window all day, watching strangers pass by. She waited because mothers always wait. Back at Hamza's house, Sarah reorganized everything. She changed the curtains. She rearranged the furniture. She erased every sign that Amina had ever existed there. Hamza watched silently. His guilt remained trapped deep inside his chest, but his weakness ruled his actions. At night, he sometimes remembered how Amina used to sit waiting for him, how she used to warm his food, how she used to pray for him with trembling hands. But he buried those memories under comfort, because courage is harder than convenience. One evening, Amina collapsed outside the house. The neighbors rushed her to a small clinic. The doctor examined her and sighed. "She is weak, malnourished, and emotionally exhausted. She needs family support." Nusrat stood awkwardly. "She has a son." The doctor looked up. "Then where is he?" No one answered. That night, Nusrat finally dialed Hamza's number. "Hamza, your mother is very ill." He paused. "What happened?" "She fainted today. Doctor says she needs care." There was a deep silence. Sarah was standing nearby. Hamza finally said, "I'll see," and the call ended. That night, he never went. Amina lay on the clinic bed, staring at the ceiling. She whispered, "Rashid, am I a burden now?" Tears slid down the sides of her eyes and soaked into the thin pillow. She had not asked for luxury. She had not asked for gratitude. She had only asked for a place in her son's heart, and even that was taken. The next morning, a nurse asked her gently, "Will your son come?" Amina smiled faintly. "My son is busy." That same morning, Hamza sat at his office desk but could not focus. His chest felt heavy. His hands shook. His heart felt restless. Memories returned without permission. His mother wiping his sweat. His mother feeding him with trembling hands. His mother praying for him alone in the dark. For the first time, guilt became louder than comfort. He stood up. Suddenly, "I need to go somewhere," he told his boss and rushed out. Hamza ran through the hospital corridor. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He reached the room and saw Amina lying still on the bed. Her face looked older, thinner, broken. He stepped inside slowly. Ami. Her eyes opened. She looked at him. For a moment, he expected anger. She just smiled. "You came." Those two words crushed him more than any curse ever could. Hamza sat beside her bed. "I'm sorry, Ami." She raised a trembling hand and touched his cheek. "I'm not angry," she whispered. Then she looked into his eyes and asked softly, "Beta, did I ever hurt you?" And Hamza had no answer, because the truth was, she never did. The hospital room was filled with the quiet sound of a slow heartbeat monitor. Amina lay on the bed like a shadow of the woman she once was. Her skin had grown pale, her hands thin and weak, and her eyes, once full of prayer and patience, now carried a tired acceptance. Hamza sat beside her, holding her fragile hand. For the first time in years, he felt how cold his mother's fingers had become. "Ami." His voice shook. "Why didn't you call me earlier?" Amina smiled faintly. "A mother never wants to become a burden beater." That sentence pierced Hamza's heart like a knife. Burden. The woman who carried him for 9 months. The woman who starved so he could eat. The woman who begged Allah day and night for his success. A burden. Hamza lowered his head in shame. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "A big mistake." Amina gently shook her head. "No, Beta. You only did what your heart allowed you to do." Those words hurt more than anger ever could. At home, Sarah was calm. Calm. Hamza had left in a hurry, telling her his mother was in the hospital. She had only responded with, "Go if you want. No worry. No fear, no regret." Because hearts that never loved deeply, never feel lost deeply either. Sarah walked around the house, enjoying the silence. No old woman coughing in the corner, no prayers, whispering at dawn. No reminders of sacrifice, only comfort. Only control. The doctor walked into Amina's room and looked at Hamza seriously. "She is very weak. Long-term emotional stress, malnutrition and neglect have damaged her health." Hamza asked in a trembling voice, "Will she be okay?" The doctor paused. "With proper care, we can try. But you must understand she is fragile now. Every emotional shock can be dangerous." Hamza nodded. "I will take her home," he said firmly. "She will never be alone again." The doctor looked at him carefully. That decision should have been made a long time ago. That night, Hamza stayed beside Amina's bed. He held her hand like a scared child. "Ami, I'm bringing you home." Amina's eyes widened slightly. "She will not like it." Hamza knew exactly who she meant. "I don't care. You are my mother." For a moment, Amina closed her eyes. Not in happiness, in fear, but "I don't want to become the reason for your broken home," she whispered. His heart twisted. "You were never the reason," he said softly. "I was." 2 days later, Hamza brought Amina back to the house, the same house that once belonged to her, but now felt like a stranger's place. When the door opened, Sarah froze. Her face lost its color. "What is this?" she snapped. "Why did you bring her here?" Hamza replied firmly, "Because this is her home." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Your home, Hamza, not mine with her." Amina stood quietly behind him, holding her small bag. Not a single word, not a single complaint, only tired eyes watching a storm approach inside the house. Sarah exploded. "You promised me she would never return." Hamza shouted back. "And I never promised you that I would abandon my mother forever. You chose me." "Yes, and I destroyed myself in the process." Those words shocked Sarah. She had never seen this side of him. "I suffered because of your demands," Hamza continued. "I watched my mother die slowly while I lived comfortably. You made me choose between love and duty, and I chose wrongly." Sarah's voice turned cold. "Then choose again." Hamza looked at Amina. Then at Sarah. And for the first time in his life, he spoke without fear. "I choose my mother." Amina stepped forward suddenly. "Stop it," she whispered weakly. Both of them fell silent. "I did not come here to break a home," she said. "If my presence destroys peace here, then I will leave again." Hamza looked at her in horror. "Ami, no." She placed her trembling hand on his arm. "Beta, I have already lost everything once. I don't have the strength to see you lose everything too." Sarah watched silently. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt, fear, because now she realized she could lose Hamza that night. Sarah could not sleep. For the first time since marriage, she felt insecure. Hamza slept in his mother's room on the floor, not beside her. Sarah stared at the ceiling. Why did this hurt? She had one, hadn't she? Then why did she feel like she was losing? The next morning, an elderly neighbor came to see Amina. She looked at Amina's thin face and burst into tears. "You raised him alone," the neighbor cried, "and this is what the world gave you in return." Amina looked away in silence. The neighbor turned to Hamza with anger in her eyes. "Never forget, son. A mother's tears never go unanswered. Those words stayed with him like a curse that same evening. Hamza received an unexpected call. It was from an old friend of Sarah's family. Hamza, the man said hesitantly. There is something you should know about Sarah before it's too late. Hamza's heart raced. What is it? The man paused. She was married once before. The world shook. She left her husband after forcing him to leave his parents as well. When he refused, she walked away. Hamza's hands began to tremble. The puzzle pieces finally started forming a terrifying picture that night. Hamza confronted Sarah. Why didn't you tell me about your first marriage? Sarah froze. Then she laughed bitterly because it didn't matter. It matters to me. Why? Because I left a man who couldn't obey me. Hamza looked at her in disbelief. You destroyed another family, she replied without shame. If a man can't choose his wife over his parents, he doesn't deserve to be a husband. Those words sealed her fate. Hamza walked out of the room. He went straight to Amina. She was praying. He sat quietly beside her. Tears rolled down his face. For years, he whispered, I thought I was a good man. Today, I realized I was only a weak man. Amina placed her hand on his head. Weakness can still be healed, Beta, but cruelty destroys everything. Sarah realized she was losing control. She packed her bag in rage. If your mother stays, I leave. Hamza replied calmly, then go. That single sentence shattered Sarah's pride. She screamed, she cried, she threatened, but the decision had been made for the first time. His wife's words had lost their power. That night Amina whispered in her prayer, Ya Allah, don't break my son because of me. Either soften hearts, or take me back to you. She did not ask for happiness, she asked for peace. Sarah walked out of the house at night. But storms don't end when someone leaves. Sometimes they return stronger. Sarah did not go to her parents' house that night. She went somewhere darker, somewhere where anger was not questioned, only fueled. She stayed in a small rented room on the other side of the city, alone with her rage, her wounded pride, and a heart burning with revenge. For the first time in her life, she had been rejected, not by a man, but by a mother, and to Sarah, that was unforgivable. She sat on the bed staring at the wall for hours. How dare he choose her? She whispered to herself. How dare an old woman take my place? For years, men had bent for her. For years, decisions had followed her will, and now, she had lost control. Her phone buzzed. It was her lawyer cousin Fahad. You left the house? He asked. Yes, she snapped. And I won't return until I destroy him emotionally. Fahad sighed. You're married, Sarah. Think carefully. I am thinking carefully, she replied coldly. I'll file for divorce. And I'll take everything I can. Her eyes gleamed with revenge. Back at the house, silence had returned, but it was a different kind of silence. Not tense, not poisonous, just heavy. Amina lay in the small room, weak and exhausted. Hamza sat beside her, feeding her soup quietly, like she once fed him when he was sick. Each spoon felt like a confession of guilt. You don't have to do this, Amina whispered. I should have done it long ago, Hamza replied softly. For the first time in years, they shared a moment of peaceful silence, but peace does not last long when storms are on the way. 3 days later, a legal envelope arrived at the door. Hamza opened it. His hands trembled. It was a divorce notice along with it. Demands full ownership of half the house, compensation for mental abuse monthly, maintenance, public accusation of controlling behavior. Hamza closed his eyes. So, this was her revenge. Hamza tried to hide the letter, but a mother senses trouble even in silence. What happened? Amina asked. It's nothing, Ami. He failed to lie. That night, she found the notice. She sat in the dim light, reading each line slowly. Tears fell onto the paper because of me, she whispered. Hamza rushed to her. Ami, because of her choices. But the damage had been done that night. Amina's blood pressure dropped dangerously. Hamza rushed her to the hospital once again. This time, the doctor was direct. She cannot survive repeated emotional shocks, he said. Her heart is too weak. Any intense stress can be fatal. Hamza felt the ground slip beneath his feet. How do I save her? He asked desperately. The doctor looked at him carefully. Remove stress from her life completely. Hamza nodded, eyes burning with fear. But how do you remove stress when your own wife is the storm? Sarah did not stop at divorce papers. She went to social media. She posted vague accusations. Some mothers poison their sons. Some men never grow up. A wife can never compete with blind motherhood. People talked. Rumors spread. Hamza's reputation began to suffer at work. Whispers followed. Comments judged him. And through every humiliation, Amina blamed herself. Some neighbors supported Hamza, others doubted him. One evening, Amina overheard 2 women whisper outside. Because of that old woman, the young marriage broke. That sentence crushed her that night. She made a decision in silence the next morning. Hamza woke up to an empty room. Amina was gone. Her prayer mat was folded. Her medicine box was missing. Her slippers were gone. Panic exploded inside his chest. Ami, he shouted. No answer. He searched the house, the street, the nearby lanes. Nothing. A cold fear took over his body. He returned home in despair, and found a small folded letter on Amina's bed. It read, "Beta, you chose me, now let me choose your peace. Do not search for me, do not destroy your life. Because of me a mother's duty is to give, not to take. If my presence destroys your home, then my absence may save it. May Allah protect you always." Ami. The paper slipped from Hamza's hands. His scream shook the walls. Hamza went mad with fear. He went to police. 2 shelters. 2 hospitals. He searched everywhere, no trace. 3 days. 4 days. 7 days. Nothing. Each night, he sat alone in the silent house, the same house where both women who defined his life were now gone. One by pride. One by sacrifice. And he was left with regret. When Sarah heard that Amina had disappeared, she smiled. So she finally left for good. She said she filed the next phase of her legal case immediately. She thought she had won, but she didn't know. A mother's exit is never empty, that it always carries consequences. Amina had gone to the only place she believed she still belonged, the grave of her husband, Rashid. She sat beside the cold stone, weak and shaking. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I failed to keep our family together." She stayed there all night, under the open sky. By morning, she collapsed. Hamza single quotes his phone rang early. "Is this Hamza, son of Rashid?" "Yes." "Who is this?" "This is the caretaker of the old graveyard near Sector 9. There is an elderly woman here. She collapsed near a grave. We found your number in her pocket." Hamza dropped the phone. His world stopped. He reached the graveyard in minutes. Amina lay on a broken bench, unconscious. Her face was pale, her pulse weak. Hamza fell to his knees. "Ami, wake up, please." The caretaker helped him take her to the hospital. Doctors rushed her into emergency. Hamza paced outside, shaking uncontrollably. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what it meant to lose his mother, and it was happening in front of him. Sarah's case collapses that same day. News reached Sarah that Amina was in critical condition. Something strange happened inside her chest. Not guilt. Fear. If the mother dies, everything will fall on her. Public opinion. Legal pressure. Social backlash. For the first time, her revenge tasted bitter. Inside the ice, doctors tried to stabilize Amina. Hamza sat outside, whispering, "Ami, don't leave me. Not like this. I still have so much to fix." But fate remained silent. As night fell, the doctor came out of the ice and looked directly at Hamza. "We have done what we can," he said quietly. "The next few hours are extremely critical." Hamza slid down against the while tears streamed down his face. He whispered, "I chose too late." The hospital corridor was colder than any winter Hamza had ever known. The white lights above him felt harsh and unforgiving, and the ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than thunder in his ears. Every second that passed felt like a hammer striking his heart. Inside the ice, his mother fought silently. Outside, Hamza fought with his regret. He sat on the cold floor, his back against the wall, his head lowered, his hands trembling. Every memory he had tried to bury now attacked him at once. His mother holding his hand on his first day of school. His mother waiting on the doorstep late at night. When he came home tired. His mother smiling, even when her own heart was breaking. And now, she lay behind a glass door, surrounded by machines, depending on fate. "I chose too late," he whispered again and again. Hamza had never been a man of deep prayer. He believed in God, yes, but he had taken blessings for granted. Now, sitting on that hospital floor, he realized how small he truly was. He stood up suddenly and walked to the quiet prayer room. Alone. No one saw him kneel down. No one saw his shoulders shake. No one saw the tears that soaked the prayer mat. His voice broke. "You gave me a mother when I deserved nothing. I chose comfort over her heart. I chose silence over her tears. If there is any justice in this world, punish me, but don't take her." For the first time in his life, he did not ask for success, money, or respect. He asked for his mother. Meanwhile, Sarah had not slept peacefully since she heard that Amina was in critical condition. The news that once felt like victory now felt like a threat hanging over her life. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages. Some were from relatives. Some from neighbors. Some from unknown people who had seen her social media posts. "This is what you did to an old woman. Her tears will destroy you. No court will save you now." For the first time, Sarah felt what it meant to lose control. She went to the mirror and stared at her face. "This isn't my fault," she whispered to herself, but the mirror did not agree. After long, endless hours, the ICU door finally opened. Hamza stood up instantly. The doctor stepped out, his face calm but serious. "We were able to stabilize her condition," he said. "But I must be honest, her body is extremely weak. She has lived under emotional stress for too long. The damage is deep." Hamza felt his knees weaken. "Will she survive?" he asked. The doctor paused. "Only if her heart remains peaceful. Any emotional shock now could be very dangerous." Hamza nodded, tears falling freely. "I won't let anything touch her peace again." The words came too late, but they were finally true. A few hours later, Amina opened her eyes. The room was quiet. Hamza sat beside her bed, his head resting near her hand like a frightened child. She moved her fingers weakly. Hamza felt the movement and looked up in shock. Amy. Her eyes met his. That familiar warmth was still there. You came back so tired, she whispered. Those words shattered him. Even in her weakest state, she cared about his tiredness. I'm here, he said, choking. I'm not going anywhere. She closed her eyes slowly. Good, she whispered. Then I can rest. Hamza leaned forward, holding her hand tightly. Amy, I have to tell you something. She looked at him slowly. Sarah has filed for a divorce, and she blamed you for everything, he said with pain in his voice. Amina's eyes filled with tears, not for herself, for him, so much anger in one heart. She whispered, it burns everything. Hamza broke. I never wanted this. Amy, I was weak. She raised her trembling hand and touched his cheek. Strength is not never falling. Beta, she said softly. Strength is standing up after falling. Her voice grew faint. Promise me one thing. Anything, Amy. Never let your heart become hard again. Not for anyone. I promise, he cried. And for the first time in his life, that promise came from a broken but honest heart. Late that evening, Sarah arrived at the hospital. She stood at the entrance of the ward like a stranger at a foreign door. Her confidence was gone. Her pride was shaken. Hamza saw her from a distance. Their eyes met. For the first time, Sarah did not speak loudly. I heard she is awake, she said quietly. Hamza looked at her for a long moment. She is not your enemy, he replied. She never was. Sarah lowered her gaze. I never thought she would leave everything for you like that, she whispered. Hamza replied calmly. She left for me long before you entered my life. Sarah had no answer. He turned and walked back to his mother's room. Sarah stood there alone, surrounded by the echo of her own choices. 3 days later, the court hearings officially began. But the story Sarah had built started to collapse. Neighbors testified. Medical records were presented. The caretaker from the graveyard spoke. Even the doctor described Amina's fragile condition due to emotional neglect. The judge listened in silence. When Sarah's lawyer tried to argue that Amina was interfering, the judge interrupted him sharply. Is caring for your son now a crime? For the first time in her life, Sarah lost in a place where words once obeyed her. The court rejected her major claims. No house. No false compensation. No public blame. Only silence. That evening when Sarah walked out of the courthouse, the world felt empty. No one waited for her. No one defended her. People who once admired her strength now whispered about her cruelty. She realized something terrifying. Control gives power, but compassion gives protection. And she had chosen control. Amina slowly recovered, not fully, but enough to sit by the window again. Hamza stayed beside her day and night. He fed her. He helped her walk slowly through the house she had once been forced to leave. Each step she took back into that home felt like a silent victory of patience over pride. Sometimes she would look at him and smile. This is enough, she would say softly. And for once, it really was. One afternoon, Sarah came to the house for the last time. There were no arguments. No shouting. Only silence. She stood at the door while Hamza stood a few steps. Inside, I am leaving the city, she said. Hamza nodded. I pray you find peace, he replied. She hesitated. Then, in a voice that barely resembled her old one, she said, I never knew what it meant to have someone love you without conditions. I lost that lesson. Hamza looked at her gently. Some lessons come late, he said. Some come only once. She turned and left, this time without control. One evening, as the sunset painted the sky orange, Amina sat beside Hamza in the courtyard. Do you know why Allah created mothers? She asked softly. Hamza shook his head. So the world would always remember what mercy looks like, she said. She closed her eyes. Never forget that. Amina did not die that year. She lived quietly. Simply, without demands. Without complaints. But her health never fully returned, and Hamza never again took a single moment with her for granted. Every cup of tea he served, every blanket he placed over her, every prayer he made beside her, was his way of answering the tears she once cried alone.